Hi everyone, this is Seraphim Step and I'm transgender female.
Hey everybody, my name is Ryan Haines and I'm a Christian and we are good friends.
So today we are going to have a Christian-Transgender dialogue.
And so it was originally your idea to do this video, and so why don't you tell everybody why you wanted to do this?
Yeah, the purpose of doing this kind of video is because I want to show people outside of Christianity and outside of transgenderism that transgender can become friends with people from Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I would like to state that in this video, I would appreciate Ryan address me as Seraphin if you feel there's a need to use a third-person pronoun, but if you use a male gender pronoun, that's okay with me too.
Thank you, appreciate
Mm-hmm.
that. And just wanted to say also that the reason why I agreed to do this is not only because we are such good friends, but because I saw this as a great opportunity for Christians to be able to hear from my friend's personal story, to be able to get a better understanding of transgenderism, because Jesus tells us to have compassion on all people, and I don't think that's possible apart from understanding. So it doesn't do us any good to ignore the LGBT community or to talk past them, but we really need to understand who they are, what their experiences are, so that we can know how to love them and be able to bring the gospel to them in the appropriate way. So we decided that Seraphin was going to go first, sharing a little bit about your background. So I took some time to prepare some questions, and so we're just going to go through those in this video. So first, can you just tell us a little bit about your background, kind of your story, where you're from, how old are you, how'd you end up in New York City?
Okay, so I'm Chinese, so I came from China. I came to the United States when I was 14 years old. And I'm currently 27, and I was living with my dad in California for a while, and after graduation from UC San Diego, I moved here to live with my mom. Hopefully, I can get a permanent career in New York City, so we can take care of each other.
Got it. And what did you study while you were in college?
I study biochemistry.
Biochemistry, so you were smarty pants.
No,
Yes, you are.
Yes, I am.
Right.
I'm also a beauty guru.
A beauty what?
Beauty guru.
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 English is not Seraphim's first language.
It is not.
Now, you already told the people that you identify as transgender, and so I was wondering if maybe we could just have you describe a little bit of that process of self-understanding that you went through. Maybe like, when did you realize you were transgender and what led you to that understanding?
Okay, so a symptom that plays a major role in understanding of what I am is called gender dysphoria.
Okay.
So gender dysphoria is something that you feel extremely discomfort being one's biological gender. For example, I was born biological male, but psychological wise, I play more of a female role. So I feel like a female is more appropriate gender for me in terms of social interaction. And I came to realization when I am a transgender female is 2 years ago, when I had to attend a wedding, when I had to be completely a male, and then I felt very disgusted by it. When I looked myself in the mirror, I actually wanted to throw up. So that's when I realized that this isn't the correct path for me. I need to change something to suit my routine.
So that
social needs.
Okay, so that wedding was like a very important defining moment. Okay, and so what about before that wedding?
Before that wedding, I am dressed the way that how I'm dressing right now. So people always perceive me as female, on a daily basis. Okay.
And so, like, what about when you were a kid? Was there ever any kind of like, when you look back, could you see gender dysphoria even back in childhood?
Yes, so when I was a kid, I always playing with Barbies. I play with the girls next door. I'm not very involved in sports, and all of my those kind of celebrity role models are female. Got it. So yeah, it makes me wanted to become more and more like them. I never wanted to be more like the male role model.
Okay, got it. And also Disney princesses.
Yes, Disney princesses.
And who's your favorite?
I would say probably The Little Mermaid.
The Little Mermaid, good
Yeah.
choice. That was
But
one of
I
my
do
favorite
like
movies growing up.
but I do like Cinderella a lot because it was a very romantic notion.
Okay, right on. Cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love the good old Disney movies. Okay, so you mentioned that you saw this early on, even as a child. So this was not something where one day you woke up and you were like, "I'm going to be transgender
No.
today."
Yeah, the thing about transgenderism is that when you are actually a child, you don't really understand what transgender is until you actually exposed to someone who is transgender. So, for example, last couple years, I was living in a LGBT neighborhood, so I actually get to learn about transgender from the actual transgender person instead of the rumors that we have around societies.
Okay.
So they really misinterpret the transgenders. In China, we used to think transgender as a man dressed like a woman, like cross-dressers.
Got it.
They got surgeries to do like prostitution or show business. So it's a really misconception of what transgenderism really is.
Okay. So it was like as you got to understand what transgenderism is, you started to be like, okay, that sounds like me.
Yes,
And so then you were like,
correct.
then you became to embrace that label, and you're like, yeah, that's definitely how I feel.
That is
okay.
correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing. I think that was helpful. So far in our conversation, you've already used a lot of kind of specific terminology that's common in the LGBTQ community. So I'm wondering if maybe the next step for everybody who's watching, if we can go through some of those key terms and have you define them for anyone who might not be familiar with what those words mean.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so let's start with words that have to do with gender identity.
Okay.
Okay, and maybe first you want to just tell people what gender identity means in your understanding?
So gender identity basically means how you identify yourself. What gender do you think you belong to instead of what gender you're biologically born with. So the first terminology is transgender.
Right.
Transgender is someone who feels that their gender their psychological gender does not align with the biological gender. Just transgender also can mean transsexual, which means that someone who has undergoes through the medical treatment, helping you become more and more like a biological female.
Okay. So
transsexual is someone who received the treatments, and transgender is someone who identifies psychologically as a female.
Okay.
But
So would it be appropriate to say that transgenderism and gender dysphoria are synonymous? Right, that means the same thing. Like to have gender dysphoria is to be transgender, but not everyone who is transgender is
not
a transsexual.
everyone who's transgender is transsexual because there is a lot, cause and effect. There's a lot of risk that you have to think about, such as the bottom surgery. Like 10 years ago, it wasn't so medically advanced, and people actually die on the surgery table. So that is a big concern of people. Whether you want to go through the painful surgery.
Okay.
Which is understandable. But right now in the current society, transgender also means a umbrella term. Someone identify as gender queer also categorized under the transgender terminology, which is somewhat confusing even to the people within the LGBT community.
Yeah, I get confused sometimes.
I really hope that they can fix that issue later on in the in the future.
Yeah. Okay. So you already used another term, gender queer. So what does gender queer mean?
Gender queer is a very broad term, and basically it means that someone who haven't identified their gender identity yet.
Okay.
So they're still searching.
Okay.
They're still identifying.
All right. And then how does that relate to another term that I hear being used a lot is gender non-binary, or some people say gender non-conforming.
Okay, gender non-binary basically means that your psychological gender does not align with both male or female.
Okay.
So for someone who biologically born male, and they also don't feel like they belong to the female category.
So they don't necessarily feel comfortable being
so
categorized
they're like
as one or the other?
somewhere in between.
Okay, thank you. And then last one is cisgender. What does cisgender mean?
Cisgender is very simple. It means just your psychological gender align with your biological gender. For example, you're a cisgender male.
Okay, right. So yeah, to summarize, I would be considered cisgender because I am biologically male and I feel like a male. I feel
correct.
comfortable in my biological body
That's
and being
correct.
called a male. Okay, so thank you. That's helpful. Let's move on to. Did you have something else you wanted to say?
No.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Okay, so thank you for helping us understand gender identity. Let's move on to a closely related field and talk about sexual orientation. So
Okay.
first of all, tell us, what is sexual orientation and why is it not the same as gender identity?
So sexual orientation is the gender that you are attracted to.
Mm.
So it's actually it's not just by yourself. It's not just how you identify yourself. It's actually involve other genders within the society. For example, your gender involves in my sexuality because I am attracted to other genders.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So sexual orientation, to summarize, is who you're romantically inclined to be
Yes.
with, who you're sexually attracted to.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
the gender that you want to be romantically involved with.
Got it.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. So let's go through some of these. I think everyone's probably familiar with the terms homosexual and heterosexual. We probably don't need to go over that.
Okay.
But what about bisexual? What does that
So
mean?
bisexual is a individual who attracted to both male and female
Okay.
only,
Okay.
both gender.
Okay.
And asexual means someone who does not want sexual feelings.
Okay, so someone who
So
would
someone
say
who
they...
doesn't want to have sex.
Okay, so
Someone who doesn't value sex or does not like the idea of sex. They just want to be, emotional, connect with one another.
Okay, all right.
That's what people who has asexual tendency is. They don't feel sexual desire is necessary,
Okay.
and they don't feel that they don't like the sensation of intimacy.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Okay, and then one final one for you to clarify for us is pansexual. What does pansexual mean?
So pansexual is even more complex than the other
Okay.
gender orientation. Sexual orientation. So pansexual means that someone who value you as who you are individually,
Mhm.
despite the fact that what gender you are, what race you are,
Okay.
or what species you are.
Okay.
I shouldn't say species because that's illegal. But like pansexual is very godlike because they are able to fall in love with any kind of people.
So let me just ask you one clarifying question about pansexuality. What would you say is the difference between being a pansexual and a bisexual? Since both can be attracted to male or female, what's the difference there?
So the major difference is that pansexual is also bisexual, but they are more capable of falling in love with any kind of people. For example, if you are incapacitated, like pansexual can also fall in love with you. Like other people think that it's a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm.
Pansexual does not think that.
Okay,
So any kind of deal breaker does not apply to pansexual.
there's no deal breakers.
There's no
for
deal breakers.
pansexuals.
They
Okay.
view you as spiritual wise.
Okay.
They view you as they value you as a person instead of like what your physical condition is.
Okay, got it. Now maybe for the audience watching, we could both identify ourselves according to our gender identity and our sexual orientation so they can have an example.
Okay.
So I'll let you go first.
So my sexual orientation is I consider myself a straight female.
Right. Because your gender identity is...
Because my gender identity is female.
Okay. So I want to just have people hear that because that was very helpful for me to understand that you identify yourself, you recognize yourself as a heterosexual female.
Yes.
Right, so that was very important for me to understand that. So now I'll identify myself, so I would say that I am a cisgender heterosexual man. So I feel comfortable in a male body, feel comfortable being called a man, and I am sexually attracted to women.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have your examples.
I hope this makes perfect sense for all of you who's watching.
Thank you for clarifying some of those terms. I think that's going to be helpful for a lot of people. Now that we have some of that clarification out of the way, I want to go back to talk more about your experience.
Okay.
So I imagine that it is not easy growing up transgender.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please help us to understand what that was like?
So as I was saying earlier, that when you actually were a kid or a teenager, if you don't expose yourself to an actual transgender person, you do not know what transgender is. So what I can tell you is that I was a very feminine boy who liked to dress in female clothes, who liked to play with makeup, who liked to play with dolls and watch girly shows. And it was kind of a problem with the society in China because you will attract bullies who will pick on you because they feel like you're easy target.
Okay.
And yeah, so and especially you have to, if you found a problem, if you found like bullies, and if you report that to the principal or a teacher, they won't really do anything about it because the social norm is that, it's kind of like a natural selection. If you're weak, like that's why people bully you. Like, why don't you, shake things up, like man up and start being a real man. But like that's just not how really occurred to me naturally. Like it's either I had to pretend, or even I pretend like I can't really act the same way that males do, and that's pretty hard throughout the childhood.
Now, did you feel like you had many friends growing up?
I mostly hang out with female friends. I don't really do anything with the males because they are into like sports stuff. Like we don't really have common interests, but with female we do actually have common interests, like common like conversation topics.
Yeah. So as you were growing up, one question I'm curious about: how did you view men? Like those boys that you would grow up with. Like, were you scared of them because they bully you, or like what did you think when you saw other boys?
I just feel like men's are less considerate than female, because female does actually stick more united with each other. So they defend each other, they hang out each other, they even go to the bathroom together. And for men, you don't really see that. Like they, I mean, I don't really hang out with them very often, but they're very aggressive. Okay. And I feel like if I hang out with them many times, like I will just get myself into a trouble situation.
Okay. So what I'm hearing in that is maybe it sounds like you're saying that like it's felt like women were safe, men were not safe to be with.
That is true.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And now, what about with like your family situation? Did
my family
how did your
is
parents
all
react to these kinds of things?
My parents does not support the sissy like behavior. Okay. They always trying to correct me, but it's never worked. It didn't work. So but like it is what it is. They know that I'm just that kind of personality because they thought that was a personality thing. So they said that I'll just be more careful within the school environment. Like safety is more important. They didn't discriminate me, but they were very concerned about how other people will treat me based on my behavior. So yeah, but they are very. My dad went to California since I was 7, so I don't really have much memory of him. I don't really grow up with him. Okay. But the memory I have was like I grew up as under child abuse. Okay. But from him. So I grew up under child abuse, and it's because of the way he abused me. That's why my mom's side of family, they really oppose him and they try to boycott him, and that's why he actually, in the sense of escaping from China to United States. Okay.
And then what happened when you moved to California and then you were living with your dad? Did things get any better between the two of you?
Things didn't get any better. Like my high school life, when I was living with him, it was actually makes me feel like an agony because he has a lot of punishment because the way that I am. So he forced me to work out with him every couple times a week, which.
And so was that like his way of trying to masculinize you?
Yes,
make you
that's what he said.
Okay.
But I just don't know how to say this, but I do feel like my dad is also belong to the LGBT community. But he just really scared of coming out.
Oh, okay. So you get the sense that maybe
Yes.
he's gay, or
I do believe that he's homosexual.
okay.
Because he does not like women to touch him. That's really weird.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder why that is.
Well, I mean, it's because I inherit some of his characteristic.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I know that the way he thinks is very somewhat similar to mine.
Okay.
That's why I know that he might be, but he's afraid to come out.
Okay. Now, another question then is, how did your parents, your mom and your dad, respond when you told them that you were transgender? Or...
My dad disowned me before I came out to him.
Okay.
He disowned me actually after high school, like
So
the first year.
How old were you at that point?
I was about 19-ish.
Okay.
19, yeah. So I mean, I already grew up. That's why he always threatened me. So after 18, you're on your own. Like, I'm not going to take care of you.
Okay.
Like, yeah, just you're gonna start your own life. You're an adult now. Like, I don't have the responsibility by law to take care of you anymore.
Okay.
So that's I see it's coming. So like, it doesn't surprise me. So we haven't been talking ever since then.
Okay. And how many years is that then?
It was in 2010.
Okay,
At the end of 2009. So it's been 7 years.
Okay. All right. And how about your mom? How was her reaction to these things?
So she was very upset when I came out. She knows that I'm very feminine. Like, I've been dressed like this ever since I was like 17.
Okay.
So she knows that there's something different about me, but she doesn't know exactly what it is, and she's afraid to think of that way. So I came out to my mom as homosexual first because I was trying to work things out with this guy. I wasn't in a relationship, but like, I was trying to date this guy, and I lied to my mom. I wouldn't visit him, and then my mom was like, "Oh, you told me that you were you told me that you were taking a trip with your friends. Like, how come like you're in the airport now?"
Right.
So I said that, I took an airplane to see him. So that's how like I came out to my mom, because because of this guy like I was trying to date. Yeah, that's how it is.
Yeah, and so you and your mom are still pretty close though.
Yes.
Yeah.
My mom is a very open-minded person.
Your mom's great.
Yeah,
she's
my
a great
mom.
cook.
My mom
a great
is
cook.
My mom is a very open-minded person. The only problem is that she's afraid how other people are going to view me, and how other people is going to view her.
Right.
So she's afraid that if she has a transgender daughter, then her friends will abandon her as well. But which I'm glad nobody did.
Yeah.
Like, all of her friends who she considered very traditional are all accept my transition very, very well, and they are very supportive of me.
Yeah. I even remember when I came over for dinner for the first time at your mom's place, one of the first questions she asked me was, "What do you think of my child?" And she wanted to know what my opinions were, because, like, so it's obvious that she really does care about you and wants you to have friends and things, but we talked through all of that.
My mom knows that, like, I always treat people with sincereness. But people don't really always treat me like a real friend. Like, I have this problem for a very long time throughout college, throughout high school. It's really hard.
What problem? You said you have a problem.
So the problem is that I treat my friend like with 100% honesty, but people lie to me all the time. I mean, that's the social norm. Like, everybody lies, but I just don't feel. Yeah, it's
just
not okay.
The norm, it's not okay.
But I just don't feel like. If I'm 100% honest with you, how come you're not 100% honest with me?
And
because if someone lied to you, then everything else becomes a suspect. Like, you don't know who to trust anymore.
It's true. And may I just say that is probably one of the things about our friendship I appreciate the most, is how you and I have been and continue to be very open and honest with each other. And I respect the way you're honest with me and allow me to be honest with you. So
I mean, even though I'm not belong to Christianity, but I also learned from Christianity that you don't really have to lie. Like always being honest, always.
Yeah, honesty is a big part.
Yeah, always hold this compassion within yourself and apply it to other people.
Certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly.
And
Is there anything else you want to say about the coming out thing?
one thing that I didn't tell you is that my mom was very upset when I first come out as transgender.
Okay.
She thought that it's because the way she educated me, that's how I am right now. But it has nothing, I personally feel like it has nothing to do with the way she raised me. She was blaming herself is because she has like a failed marriage. That's why like it has some sort of psychological trauma to me. But I personally don't think it has anything to do with it. And I also understand that, my mom has a bad marriage. They also have a lot of difficulty that bring to her, especially she's like semi-handicapped right now. Yeah, so she wasn't took it very well at first, but she very quickly pick up like understanding of my situation, and she felt that this is actually better for me because it suits who I am inside.
All right. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. So I really hope that my answer really makes sense to you, and I hope that you can help the people from the Christianity understand what other transgender have been through their life. And since you get to ask a lot of great questions for me, I also prepared one question for you. And so let's say that if you have a child came out to you as transgender, I want to know, as a missionary from Christianity, how are you going to handle that situation? So what will you tell your child? And
yeah, good question. Very good question. Important question. So the first thing that I would do is I wouldn't freak out and I wouldn't overreact. I don't think that would help the situation at all. I think sometimes parents, just because it catches them so off guard, their tendency is to just, I don't know what to do with this, and they panic, and it makes the kid feel even more uncomfortable, even more insecure. And I think most of the stories I've heard from transgender people or anyone in the LGBTQ community, when they tell their parents about it, they say their first reaction was usually not good. So I think I've learned from hearing those stories to know that, okay, if I ever have a kid who identifies as any of those things, the first thing I need to do is not freak out when they tell me. And I think the reason why I would not overreact is because in some of the research that I've done, I've come to learn that gender confusion in children is not uncommon. It's actually quite common for kids to not be totally secure in their gender identity or not totally understand what their identity is. But some of the research I've done has shown that most children, when they're supported in their biological gender and allowed to go through a natural puberty without being put on any cross-hormone stuff, the vast majority of those children will come to peace with their biological gender. And so I think as a parent, my first reaction, again, not to freak out, because it's not an unusual thing, and to just support the kid in the gender that they are and allow them to go through puberty. And I wanted to read, just to substantiate that claim that I just made, I wanted to read an article, or at least an excerpt from it, because it's really long, but I just want to read a portion of an article from Dr. Paul McHugh, who is actually one of the leading psychologists at Johns Hopkins University, who were one of the first universities in the United States to to start doing sex reassignment surgery. And so this was a man who was one of the pioneers of the surgery, but then over time came to change his mind and see that he didn't think that kind of surgery was actually helpful for transgender. So I want to just read some of his findings that he had here. When children who reported transgender feelings were tracked without medical or surgical treatment at both Vanderbilt University and London's Portman Clinic, 70 to 80% of them spontaneously lost those feelings. Some 25% did have persisting feelings, and what differentiates those individuals remains to be discerned. We at Johns Hopkins University, which in the 1960s was the first American medical center to venture into sex reassignment surgery, launched a study in the 1970s comparing the outcomes of transgendered people who had the surgery with those who did not. Most of the surgically treated patients described themselves as being satisfied, meaning they thought their surgery came out the way they wanted it to, but their subsequent psychosocial adjustments were no better than those who did not have the surgery. And so at Hopkins, we stopped doing sex reassignment surgery since producing a satisfied but still troubled patient seemed to be an inadequate reason for surgical amputation of normal organs. It now appears that our long-ago decision was a wise one. A 2011 study from an institute in Sweden produced the most illuminating results yet regarding the transgendered, evidence that should give advocates pause. The long-term study, up to 30 years, followed 324 people who had sex reassignment surgery. The study revealed that beginning about 10 years after having the surgery, the transgendered began to experience increasing mental difficulties. Most shockingly, their suicide mortality rose almost 20-fold above the comparable non-transgendered population. The high suicide rate certainly challenges the surgery prescription. And then he closes the article by saying, "At the heart of the problem is confusion over the nature of the transgendered. Sex change is biologically impossible. People who undergo sex reassignment surgery do not change from men to women or vice versa. Rather, they become feminized men or masculinized women. Claiming that this is a civil rights matter and encouraging surgical intervention is in reality to collaborate with and to promote a mental disorder." So that's from Dr. Paul McHugh, the man who...
I already heard about that.
Okay, you already heard about this article?
Not this article, but I heard about his point of view on transgenderism.
Yeah. So given in light of some of that research, I present all this to say just that I don't think that sex reassignment surgery has been proven to be helpful for transgender people. And so as that parent, I would not encourage transition in my child. So the question then becomes, if I wouldn't encourage transition, like what would I do? Once they tell me, I think the first thing I would do is thank them for being courageous enough to talk to me about it, because I know that's something that's not easy to open up about, especially if someone's very confused about it. So I would definitely take time to let my kid know that I love them and respect that they just were willing to do that.
I heard your passage that you read to us. So the question now I have for you is that if Dr. John McHugh did not publish this kind of article, what other evidence are you going to use to base off your view on gender transition?
Okay, so that was one article, but there's many more, not just by Dr. Paul McHugh. Again, you could look at the interview, not the interview, but the study that was done in Sweden that he's referencing. So he's not the only one to have studied this or to have changed his mind on it. I just read that article because I thought it was a good synopsis.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, back to if I had kids, the hypothetical question, I would be intentional to affirm the legitimacy of their feelings, but to also help them understand the difference between feelings and facts, that even though what they feel is real, it's not necessarily true. So yeah, I think that's one of the main routes I would try to take with them, is to help them understand the difference between facts and feelings, because I think that transgender feelings are tied to a misconception that the child has about themselves. It can often come from either a lie that they've believed about themselves or about their gender or about the other gender, or it could be tied to a deep wounding that's in their heart that might have come back from childhood. And so I don't think the approach, unfortunately, like what your dad was trying to do, like just trying to masculinize you, that's not at all what the approach would be that I would take. I would seek to talk with my child and to try to identify where those feelings originated from, and to talk about the heart issues that are involved underneath them, because I know that it's something that goes much deeper than just behavior. So I don't think trying to just change a kid's behavior is really going to bring resolve to the problem. I think that that's kind of an immature way to try to deal with the issue. And then, of course, all along in that process, I'd be wanting to talk to them about God, too, and talk to them about the gospel. I would make it clear that these feelings in no way disqualify them from being a Christian or being a part of the kingdom of God. And I would also tell them how awesome it is that we can actually know our Creator, right? So if anyone has any confusion about gender or sexuality or sexual orientation, the first person that we should be consulting is the God who gave us our gender in the first place. So I would tell them that how awesome it is that through Christ we can be reconciled to God, that we can know our Maker and have intimate relationship with Him, and that He can be affirming us in our biological gender and identity. And so I would also probably try to make sure that the kid was aware that God cares very much about what's going on in the heart and not only their behavior. So God wants to bring healing and resolution to what they're feeling. And ultimately, I would not want to just try to do this in one quick conversation, but to turn it into an ongoing discussion with my child. So because this is not something that's just going to go away after one conversation. The working through these feelings is a long process, and I would want to be there with my child throughout that entire process, for sure.
Okay. I heard your opinion, and so some transgender actually raised by the Christian family. So and then they said that they will study the Bible and everything, like what you were studying in Christianity, and they said that since they come to the realization that they are transgender, that makes them question that what they learn from the Bible isn't completely correct. Do you agree with that?
So I think I understand what you're saying. So what happens if a kid's raised in a Christian home and yet still doesn't believe the Bible?
No, not that they don't believe the Bible. It's just they believe the Bible, but they also believe what's happening in reality, which is the gender dysphoria they're still suffering.
Right. Yeah. So I think that I'm not responsible for how my child responds to the gospel.
Okay.
Or to the truth of God's word. So I would do everything in my ability to help them find resolve between their feelings and their biological gender, but I know it's not ultimately my job to, I don't want to use the word fix it, but to help to bring that resolution to come to pass. Okay. I think I can play a key part in it, but ultimately it's the child's decision. He's got to walk through it, or she's got to walk through it. And so how they respond to the truth and what they choose to do with it is not necessarily my responsibility. So certainly children can grow up in
So you will still let your children to decide their own gender identity?
Absolutely. I can't force someone to change their feelings at all. Yeah. And if my kid continued as being transgender, I would love that kid till the day he died.
Okay.
And he'd always be welcome in my home, always. Yeah.
Okay, that's all the question I have for you. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. And so I have a few more questions I want to ask you too.
Okay.
So since we've been talking about childhood stuff and kids coming out as transgender or homosexual, I want to talk a little bit about the issue of the suicide rate within the transgender community, because unfortunately that's probably one of the most popular facts about the transgender community is that the suicide rate, I think, is about 41%, depending on different studies that you might read, which of course is insanely high, which is a very tragic thing. And so and I only asked this because I know you said I could ask this question.
You can.
And you could talk about it publicly. You felt comfortable with it. Have you ever experienced suicidal thoughts or made any suicide attempt?
I personally never made any suicidal attempt, but there's a period of my time I actually lose the will to live. So which means that I don't feel like doing anything. Like I feel like this is the most downfall of my life. Like I'm in the bottom of everything. I just can't get myself up to boost my energy to do anything. And according to the statistics, the suicidal rate of transgender people is extremely high. I think due to many factors. People who are non-transgender tend to categorize the data, associate that with gender dysphoria, saying that this is a major issue. But however, I would like to point that out. Since I am a transgender myself, I do feel like transgender facing a lot of social issue, not just gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is actually the battle between me and myself. It's not sociological. It's not like the interaction I have for you. But what we face is also discrimination from other people. We face that there is no support from family members, and also like job seeking is terrible. Like we have less chance getting a job than regular people. So, and there's also many factors that contribute to suicidal thoughts. And when you are transgender, all of those elements tend to amplify. So this is, I think, the main contribution. It's actually a combination of many factors. It's not just based off, your transition timeline, and also for most transgender child, they are actually abandoned by their family when they're very, very young. They're not going to get a chance to go to college and graduate with a degree and find a good job. So they were abandoned from their home, and they have to learn to live with their own underdeveloped ability. I think this is the main cause, is because the parents never give the child a chance to teach them how to survive in the cruel society.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say.
Okay.
The reason why I didn't commit suicide is because I do have my mom who is supporting me,
Right.
and then I do know that if I commit suicide, my mom and my aunt, they will be very upset. And my mom has no one to look after to, and no one will associate with. That's really sad. If I commit suicide, my mom will be the lonely one in United States. And then I have to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I think that's a major part of my life, that I never attempt suicide. And I think for some other transgender people, they actually doesn't have a chance to have like any member of their family who's supporting them. This is why they in their life there is no a positive aspect of their life that they can actually hold on to. So I think that's the main cause of them actually attempting the suicide.
Yeah, and I will say that in some of the studies that I've read, even though for the transgender community as a whole the suicide rate is very high, it's even higher percentage for transgenders who did not have support from family. So that's another reason why if I did have a kid who came out as transgender, I would do everything to make sure that kid knew that he was part of the family and that I was there for him. Because life matters. The life of transgendered people matters. Your life matters. And I think that even if we have disagreements as to how we should respond or help people who are transgender, if we just start in that same place that their life matters, I think that that's enough to be able to help us to have these kinds of discussions.
I agree.
Okay, so we've talked through a bunch of different stuff already, some good stuff. I hope you guys are enjoying this. One last question subject to cover today. Can you explain to us a little bit about the process of transitioning that a transsexual would go through, kind of from start to finish, and maybe share a little bit about where you're at along the stages of those processes?
Okay, I'm just going to share the general guidelines,
Yeah.
how many treatments that you have to do,
Right.
because if you want to dive deep within each treatment, it can take forever. So a transgender person, first, in order to identify that you are actually transgender, you have to live your life as a woman for a period of time for you to go to the psychologist
And how long
claim.
is that period of time supposed to be?
It has to be probably half year to
Okay.
a year,
Okay.
because you need to give yourself enough time to get used to it.
All right.
Yeah, so it's about like a year. I did it for a year. So I did it for a year, and then I go to my psychologist and to get my referral. So the psychologist will, it takes 3 sessions. Psychologist will ask you the first session, he will give you the mental test to see if you have the basic analytical ability, so that he knows that you're not crazy. The second one is talking about your background. The third one is when he actually conclude that you actually suffer from gender dysphoria. So once you have that note, you can actually go to the endocrinologist to get your hormone pills and puberty blockers. And so that you have to take for lifetime.
Okay.
Yeah, that you have to take for lifetime.
And what happens if someone stopped taking the hormones, the cross-sex hormones?
Some hormone like testosterone, like as soon as you get on there for many months, you will develop deep voice, and that's irreversible. And for female hormones, the estradiol, you will grow like the female physique, the characteristic, but if you stop taking it, it will go away. The fat
so
will go away.
it'll revert back to...
Yes.
Okay.
The female hormone is reversible.
Okay, understood.
And each of those pills have its own side effect.
So you've been on estrogen for how long now?
For a year and a half.
Okay, and what have you noticed any side effects?
Yes, the estradiol side effect is that it will increase the chance of your blood clotting.
Okay.
So you are more likely to get a stroke. And there's a lot of side effect from the spironolactone, which is the testosterone blocker. You will physically weaken, like your muscle mass will decrease, and since it's a blood pressure medication, you will lower your blood pressure. So sometimes you feel dizzy, you feel headache. That's on the daily basis.
Okay. And I know you've reported.
Yeah, I
feeling
did.
that and having that. Yeah.
So a lot of people were confused that it's because we are biological male that we're supposed to have a more competent physical ability than a female, but that's not really true, because if you're being on hormone for so long and you have to deal with the side effect, it's actually
that changes that. Yeah.
That changes a lot. Okay, so once you've been on hormone for a year, there's an option that you can do a voice changing surgery, which is called a Wanderer galloplasty, and they will sew your vocal cords up so you will speak with a higher note. And once you've done that, you can also do a trachea shaving, which means that they will shave your Adam's apple down so it doesn't look as pronounced. After that, you can actually do the bottom surgery if you are on hormone for a year and a half. That's the medical guidelines that states that you have to be at least for a year and a half to do the bottom surgery, which I am just qualified. So the bottom surgery is actually the longest. It takes about 4 to 5 hours, and it takes about at least 3 months to recover. The cost of the bottom surgery is extremely high. It can be from $40,000 to $60,000. It depends on the doctors that you are seeing, and not many doctors that's expert at doing those kind of surgery. You have to really go to a LGBT specialist for that. And so after you completed the bottom surgery, you actually have to do the top surgery, which is optional, but like most of the transgender girls, they prefer to do the breast augmentation, which is another like a month to 2 months recovery time, and it's another $5,000 to $6,000. And last thing, once you completed your breast augmentation, last thing is that you can do a facial feminization surgery, which you had to pay out of pocket most of the time, and apply to most of the transgender female, because not everyone have the facial feature that's very close to female, and that also costs like $8,000.
Okay. So this is the whole thing is tons of money.
Very financial concerning. Yeah, and last thing, I should have said it before, once you finish all those surgeries, even before you finish all those surgeries, you can actually do a laser hair treatment, which I did it when I first started, when I was experiencing it. I just hated the life of having a beard. You have to shave, and it doesn't go well with my makeup, so I actually did it the first year, which laser hair treatment takes about like 10 treatments to complete that. I actually have a video tutorial for that.
Check out the channel.
It does take a year to get rid of your hair permanently. And that's the whole guideline for the gender transitioning process.
That's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing. It's a lot.
It's
a lot to do, and I'm only halfway done.
Okay, and so would you mind telling everybody like how far you are in that process?
Yes, all you have done? 2 years ago, I have completed the laser hair treatment, and I have been on hormones for almost 2 years, so 1.5 years, and then I'm going to schedule for a bottom surgery soon. And I have been doing the voice training and vocal cord surgery and also the trachea shaving. I still have a scar over here. So once I get my bottom surgery done, I'm going to move on to the top surgery. That's will happen like probably at the end of this year, and that's the whole transition story.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure that was informative for a lot of people. I know it was for me, as you have been educating me on these kinds of things.
You're welcome. And if you have other questions, please send it to me.
Will do.
Thank you so much for watching our first video, and I hope my explanation make perfect sense to you all. And I hope this video can help you guys understand the fundamental aspect of gender transition and what a transgender have to go through.
Yes, and if you want to learn more, my friend has a channel that's under his name, Seraphim Step. You can go on that channel, check out more videos of where he's documenting his transition. And
the link will be in the description below.
The link will be in the description below, so you can check out more of those videos. And be sure to stick around for our second video, where Seraphim's going to be asking me more questions about my perspective on transgenderism from a Christian perspective.
And if you want to learn about Christianity and how they share their faith, make sure to check out Ryan's channel for more information.
It's called The Gospel Training Ground. Link will be in the description box below also.
I'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What are you doing?
Over there.
I
get
out of here.
Center.
Whatever.
But you can barely see me.
Barely? You're right on the camera. I'm looking.
That's okay. Blame on me.
I'm not transphobic because I'm sitting right here next to you. Clearly, I'm not scared of you.
Okay, why don't you shut up and start the video?
Okay.
Thank you so much for watching our... Hold on. Thank you so much for watching what?
Our first video.
Our first video. Hold on, let me wipe my nose. Okay. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
I wasn't ready.
Okay. You look more nervous than...
I get nervous when cameras are... I am nervous.
So like me.
Just because
but like
cameras.
Your video looks pretty, natural to me.
Do you have any idea how many takes I do? I do so many. I was supposed to introduce myself.
Okay, sorry.
So you
restart. Hold on, let me
what?
just twist it to my side a little bit more.
Wait, hang on. You're gonna... It was set that way. So now the whole last part of the video is gonna be different.
So today we are going to have a Christian and transgender dialogue. Great.
Boom. Do your tricky stuff.
Hi everyone, this is Seraphim Step, and I'm transgender.
Do it again. Hey everybody, my name is Ryan Haines, and I'm a Christian, and we are good friends. We should get a better high five than that. That was pretty weak. Here,
okay.
Do it. Give me a high five.
Let's restart.
I know, but just it's gotta be loud like that. Yeah. 3, 2, 1. So. Alright guys, if this video looks terrible, his fault. Hey everybody, I hope that you found my dialogue with Seraphim to be both helpful and informative. And if you did, I'd encourage you to go check out the channel and consider subscribing, because you're going to find all kinds of videos on how to engage our culture with the gospel. And I specifically want to mention this video in the top corner where I talk about some good books on understanding homosexuality and gender identity. There's also this video down here where I give some of the basics on how to do apologetics. And then there's also this video right here where I give some helpful tips on how to talk with people from other religions and other worldviews. So enjoy the videos and enjoy the channel.